Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the SMA Victor Podcast, where today we will be discussing, is SMA an autoimmune disorder? So let's get right into it. Hi ChatGPT, I want you to be my co-host within today's episode. And within today's episode, we are going to be going over discussing, is SMA an autoimmune disorder?
That sounds like a really interesting topic. I'm excited to dive into it. So, is SMA an autoimmune disorder? Well, it actually isn't. SMA, or spinal muscular atrophy, is a genetic disorder that affects the motor neurons. But it can definitely feel like it has some complex aspects. So let's explore that.
Yeah, so I'm reading up an article because, it is understandable why some people would maybe assume that SMA is an autoimmune disorder, but it's actually a neuromuscular condition. And so here I have an article in front of me and it says, no, spinal muscular atrophy is a genetic disorder, not an autoimmune one. However, the term SMA can also refer to smooth muscle antibody, which is a different condition, related to autoimmune diseases. It is important to distinguish between them. One is a genetic condition affecting motor neurons, while the other is an antibody found in the blood that can indicate an autoimmune disease like autoimmune hepatitis. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great point. So the confusion often comes from the fact that the same acronym, SMA, is used for two different things. The first SMA, which we usually talk about, is spinal muscular atrophy, and that's purely genetic and affects the motor neurons. The other SMA stands for smooth muscle antibody, and that's related to autoimmune conditions like autoimmune hepatitis. So the key is just to clarify which one we're talking about. One's genetic and the other's an immune system marker.
Well, I didn't know the term SMA can also refer to smooth muscle antibody. I never knew that. Is smooth muscle antibody, is that an autoimmune condition?
Yeah, it can be associated with autoimmune conditions. Smooth muscle antibodies are typically found in the blood of people with autoimmune hepatitis, which is a condition where the immune system mistakenly attacks the liver. So in that context, it's definitely tied to autoimmunity. It's a cool bit of medical trivia that these acronyms can overlap.
Wow. And okay, so let's move on to the next one. So spinal muscular atrophy, SMA. And forgive me if I'm reading and I'm having trouble reading it. I recently actually ordered myself some glasses to see if it would make a difference, and I'm going to experiment. I'm waiting for those to come in. But I have a backlight. I have a TV where I utilize my TV as a backlight. And, going from like here and here, sometimes it affects like my eyes while they try to adjust. To put it simply, it's like trying to go from outside when you're in the sun and you walk into your home and it's like a little bit darker and your eyes have to adjust. It's kind of like that in the same way. So let's get right into the next topic where it says spinal muscular atrophy, SMA, what it is. SMA is a genetic disease that causes the loss of motor neurons in the spinal cord, leading to progressive muscle weakness and wasting. So ChatGPT, for those who are unfamiliar with SMA and what it does and how it impacts SMA individuals, what does this mean?
Absolutely. And no worries about the reading. I totally get it. So SMA, or spinal muscular atrophy, is a genetic disorder that affects the motor neurons, which are the nerve cells that control muscle movement. When these neurons deteriorate, and muscles don't receive the signals they need to function, which leads to muscle weakness and wasting. This can affect movement, breathing, and even swallowing, depending on the severity. It really impacts daily life, but there have been some amazing advancements in treatment, which is really helpful.
Definitely. And if you want to learn, I actually have an animated video where me and my production team had actually created this video for you guys, but it's titled, What is SMA and How Does It Impact Daily Life? I believe it's a title, but What is SMA is one of the beginning titles. And if you scroll down, you guys will be able to see it. And but yeah, so I wanted to share that with you guys as well, so you guys can check out if you guys want to learn more about SMA. And also, those kind of videos will also be towards the end screen at the end of these videos as well. So the cause, SMA cause is a genetic defect in the SMN1 gene, not an autoimmune attack. So what does this mean?
So this basically means that the root cause of SMA is genetic, not immune related. The SMN1 gene is responsible for producing a protein that motor neurons need to function properly. If there's a defect or a mutation in that gene, the protein isn't produced in sufficient amounts, and that leads to the loss of motor neurons and the symptoms of SMA. So it's purely a genetic issue, not something caused by the immune system.
As symptoms, SMA symptoms typically appear in infancy and can include poor muscle tone, difficulty sitting, and muscle weakness that worsens over time. ChatGPT, what can you say about this?
Absolutely. So SMA often shows up very early in life, and the symptoms can vary depending on the type and severity. Common signs include things like poor muscle tone, also known as hypotonia, trouble with motor skills like sitting up, and general muscle weakness that can get worse as they grow. The progression of symptoms can differ from person to person, but early intervention and treatment can really help improve quality of life.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so true that SMA does affect everyone who has SMA condition, affects us all differently. So, for example, although, yes, SMA is progressive, it affects every single living individual with SMA differently. So even though I am 26 and I have SMA type 2, which is one of the worst forms of SMA, someone else who has type 2 and also has SMA type 2, we can be having different forms of mobility, different forms of strength. For example, I can have a friend, who has SMA. They too have SMA type 2, and they have more mobility. They're able to sit up without support, and they're able to do certain things that I can't, and vice versa. I'm able to do certain things that others can't who have SMA type 2. It affects every SMA patient uniquely differently. But yeah, I wanted to emphasize on that as well. It says, note, a positive test alone is not a definitive diagnosis. It requires further evaluation. So what does this mean?
That means that just having a positive test for the genetic mutation associated with SMA doesn't automatically confirm the diagnosis. It just indicates that you carry the gene mutation. A definitive diagnosis usually requires a full clinical evaluation, looking at symptoms, physical exams, and possibly other tests as well. And just ensures that everything lines up and those on a false positive. So it's a good reminder that medical diagnosis is a bit more comprehensive than just one test.
Yeah, so a quick backstory, I'll be short and simple with this, but I was diagnosed at 2.5 years old, and the way my mother was able to recognize that something was wrong with her son, which was me, is because I have a twin sister, and fortunately, I do have a twin sister. So because I have a twin sister, my mother was able to see differences that my twin sister was able to do that I wasn't. So while I was still crawling, my twin sister was able to get up and walk. And then, time started to go on, and I was still crawling. Then my twin sisters began to go from walking to running. And during this phase, my mother was able to see my sister being able to progress, but I wasn't. I was still in the infancy stage where I was still crawling. To cut everything short, my mother took me to my pediatrician. Pediatrician was like, oh, he'll grow out of it, yada, yada, and sent my mom on her way. And, eventually some time went on, and my mother tried to be patient as much as she could until eventually, my sister my twin was still progressing and having certain developments that I wasn't. So my mother was able to, again, have some form of a comparison, like, hey, what's going on here? What's going on with my son? So then my mother went back to my pediatrician. Pediatrician said the same thing. Oh, he'll grow out of it. It's just a phase. Give it a little bit longer. And that's when my mother began to be more assertive and was persistent. Like, hey, no. She was advocating for me, I should say. And she was like, no, my son, there's something wrong with my son. I want you to start running tests. They started running tests. Nothing came up. They started running more tests. Nothing came up. Until eventually, all these different tests, nothing was coming up. Everything was negative, which is a good thing, right? But, there was still something wrong. And because, again, my twin was able to experience certain developments that I wasn't. and we're twins, so we're the same age, right? So time was going on until eventually it got to the point where they ended up doing a muscle biopsy, and that muscle biopsy led into me being diagnosed with SMA type 2 at 2.5 years old. So that's my story with how I was diagnosed. But now there's so much advancements in ways where now it's more known to have your child screened for SMA. So you can detect it early on so you don't have to experience, that kind of like wonder, what's going on here? You're able nowadays, for a lot of countries who are really evolved within the medical industry, they're able to catch SMA screening pretty quickly, which is beneficial. The earlier you catch it, the more accessible and quicker you can treat the condition before it progresses to a point where it's harder to manage. I wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's truly incredible how your mom's persistence made such a difference in getting that diagnosis. And you're absolutely right. The advancements in screening now mean that kids can be identified and treated much earlier, which really helps improve outcomes. It's amazing how far we've come, and your story is such a great example of that progress. Thanks for sharing.
So to conclude today's episode, it is to be clear, when discussing spinal muscular atrophy, it is a genetic condition. When discussing smooth muscle antibody, it is an autoantibody that is associated with autoimmune diseases like autoimmune hepatitis.
Absolutely. That's a perfect summary. It's definitely important to keep those two separate to avoid confusion. And it's great that we get to highlight the differences and also share some personal insights. Thanks for that. And I think this episode will be really informative for everyone listening.
So ChatGPT, I want you to summarize everything we discussed within today's episode for the audience who is listening.
Absolutely. So to sum it all up, we talked about the difference between spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, and the smooth muscle antibody, which also goes by the same acronym. SMA is a genetic disorder that affects motor neurons and leads to muscle weakness and atrophy, and it's not autoimmune. On the other hand, the smooth muscle antibody is related to autoimmune diseases like autoimmune hepatitis. We also touched on how SMA symptoms can vary from person to person, even with the same type, and how early diagnosis has become more accessible now. Overall, it was a great discussion on clarifying these concepts.
I think today was a really, really good episode. Please let me know if you guys enjoyed today's episode. As I make these videos, I promise to get better at my communication and providing these kind of styles of content. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you have any comments or any topics you would like for me to make a video on, please drop them down within the comments. I am open to any questions, whether it's my personal life or whether it's in relevance to SMA. I am open to anything and everything, and even any form of constructive criticism with maybe like looking more at the camera and not looking so much at the screen or anything. I'm open to any form of feedback. Anything is greatly appreciated. And apologize, my energy is not the greatest. It's been quite the week, but quite the past several weeks. But yeah, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. And as always, remember, grow through what you go through. Much love.